Okay, so I think we're gonna get started, if everyone could get settled, but yeah. Cool, so let me introduce myself. I'm Zoe from Sunrise Silver Spring. That group is co-hosting this town hall with DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, and Everyday Canvassing. Yes, get a round of applause for those fantastic groups. So let me talk about the real reason why we're here today. Many of you know that it is way too expensive to live here in Montgomery County. Tenants have been getting increases from 8%, 10%, and much more, forcing them to move or even leave the county altogether. The More Coalition, who we're working with, consists of a lot of labor groups and community groups just like us, want to put a stop to these increases, which is exactly why we are now supporting the HOME Act, which is introduced by Councilmember Will Jawando and Councilmember Mink, who will be here today, actually, on the panel. And that bill would allow for a cap on rent increases at 3% every year, which based on the average rent is like $55 a month increase. Yeah. This would allow tenants to have an affordable place to live and to be able to stay in the county where many of their homes are. But unfortunately, at the same time, there is a big problem. Councilmember Natalie Fanny Gonzalez is introducing a rival bill with developer allies, which would allow for a cap on rent increases, but at 8% plus inflation, which, if passed today, would be a rent increase of $276 per month, basically $300 per month. And this is just way too much. I mean, $50 at 3% compared to almost $300 at 8% plus inflation, based on the average rent today, is frankly too much. And tenants have said this. Based on the form that you guys have on your tables right now, tenants have sent 2,500 letters asking for real and effective rent stabilization in this county. So, and that voice that tenants have, those letters that they have signed, that is why we are deciding to support the HOME Act, so that they can have an affordable place to live and they can stay in their homes. And that is what we are also focusing on at this town hall. So, basically our schedule today, we will have guest speakers until, it's supposed to be about 1 o'clock, but it's 12:45, so we'll see. And then at around at 1, we were going to start the most important part, which is the Q&A part of the panel, where you can ask your council members any questions on rent control in this county, and they will answer those questions. And then at 2:15, again, might be a little later, but at around 2:15, we will have closing remarks, and we will talk about any next steps that you can get involved with to continue pushing for this issue. Thank you so much for coming, and we are going to kick off the guest speaker section. First we will have Alex Vasquez, who is the Montgomery County lead organizer of CASA and the region's most influential immigrant advocacy group, and he will be speaking along with a tenant who is also a member of CASA.
Yes, so we will have Alex and Alma come up in just 1 minute, but before we do, small correction, we did forget to give credit to the Montgomery County Green New Deal interns, who've been a very, very big part of putting this event on. They've been awesome in getting the word out to high schoolers, and they've done so much. Also, a lot of them speak Spanish a million times better than any of us, except, I mean, you know, they know what I'm talking about. So thank you all so much for helping making this event happen, playing such a big part of it. Without further ado, Alex Vasquez and Alma, please come on.
We're gonna go ahead and let Alma go first, and I'm gonna be translating. So.
Hola, mi nombre es Alma. Durante 14 años, mi familia y yo hemos llamado hogar a Germantown durante COVID. Encontramos estabilidad y previsibilidad financiera con la protección del tope de la renta. El alquiler se pagaba a tiempo, las facturas eran muy manejables y teníamos dinero para ahorrar para el futuro.
Good afternoon, my name is Alma, and for 14 years my family and I have called Germantown home. During COVID, we found stability and financial predictability with the rent cap protection. Rent was paid on time, bills were more manageable, and we had money to save for the future.
Luego, en junio del 2022, mi familia recibió un aumento de alquiler del 7-11%. Poco después de ese aviso, mi esposo se enfermó de COVID y no pudo trabajar durante algunas semanas. Mi esposo es el único sostén de nuestra familia. No puedo trabajar porque una de mis hijas tiene necesidades únicas que requieren asistencia de tiempo completo.
Then in June of 2022, my family received a rent increase of 7.1%. Shortly after that notice, my husband got sick with COVID and could not work for a few weeks. My husband is the only breadwinner in our family. I cannot work because one of my daughters has unique needs that require full-time assistance.
Cuando volvió al trabajo, llevábamos semanas de retraso en el alquiler. Las semanas se convirtieron en 6 meses, a pesar de nuestros mejores esfuerzos, para pagar un poco aquí y allá. Continuamos atrasándonos, solicitamos asistencia de alquiler, que ha sido un proceso abrumador. Solicitamos asistencia de alquiler, pero ha sido un proceso abrumador que lleva meses, lo que lleva a una confusión emocional y noches de insomnio.
When he returned to work, we were weeks behind rent. Weeks turned into 6 months. And despite our best efforts to pay a little here and there, we continue to fall behind. We applied for rental assistance, which has been an overwhelming process. And it has been an overwhelming process that took months, leading to emotional turmoil and sleepless nights.
En enero, mi arrendador me envió un aviso de 60 días para desalojar, para empeorar las cosas. Acabo de recibir una carta en la que se me niega la asistencia para el alquiler. Decir que estamos preocupados es quedarse corto. No sabemos a dónde ir con muy poco alquiler asequible en el condado.
In January, my landlord sent me a 60-day notice to vacate. To make matters worse, I just received a letter being denied for rental assistance. To say that we are worried is an understatement, and we don't know where we're going to go with very little affordable rent in the county.
Estoy aquí hoy para instalarles a todos a que escuchen mi historia. Es la historia de cientos en todo el condado. Estoy aquí no solo instando a que nuestros funcionarios electos tomen medidas rápidas para aprobar la estabilización de renta, sino que tengan corazón. Comunidades como la mía merecen estar aquí. Nos merecemos estabilidad y previsibilidad. Nos merecemos un hogar. Gracias.
And so I'm here today to urge all of you to hear my story. It's a story heard of hundreds across the county, and I'm here not only urging for quick action from our elected officials to pass rent stabilization, but to have a heart. Communities like mine deserve to be here. We deserve stability and predictability, and more importantly, we deserve a home. Thank you. Give it up for Alma. doing today, guys? Come on, we can be a little louder. How we doing today? There we go. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alex Vasquez. I am part of an extraordinary team of community organizers for the CASA organization. Over 122,000 members guide CASA's mission to create change as leading immigration organization in the Mid-Atlantic region. CASA combines advocacy, community organizing, and human services to serve its members and provide the support necessary for full participation in our society. And while I am here today as a CASA community organizer, I'm also here as a proud Mexican immigrant, a Montgomery County renter, and a renter who received a 10.9% rental increase in the fall of 2022. My daily work as a community organizer brings me into contact with people throughout our community who are on the verge of being forced out of their homes. Unfortunately, the percentage of rent-burdened families throughout Montgomery County has continued to grow. The Department of Housing and Community Affairs estimates that we could lose between 7,000 to 11,000 units of naturally occurring affordable housing by 2030 if rent increases continue to go unchecked. But I'm here today to say that there is a solution, and it's called rent stabilization. Rent stabilization programs, not to be confused with rent control or rent freezes, prevent extreme housing costs and price gouging spikes by limiting the rate at the rent can increase on a given year. Rent stabilization still allows rent to increase, but only by a reasonable percentage defined by law, which helps protect tenants from extreme cases of profiteering. More than 180 cities and towns in the United States currently have rent regulations to protect their tenants. This includes Prince George's County, which almost unanimously approved a rent stabilization measure on February 28th, limiting the ability for landlords to increase rent for tenants above 3% for their current rent over a 12-month period. That deserves a round of applause, guys. Beyond preventing price gouging, stabilization would have several economic benefits. First, it would provide renters economic stability, transparency, and predictability, helping them get the peace of mind they need to plan for other expenses and invest elsewhere in our economy. Second, it would prevent involuntary displacement and homelessness by ensuring that most rent-burdened renters can retain their homes yearly. Third, it would help to promote racial equity. Studies have shown that people of color and Black and Indigenous communities experience most egregious rent increases, and rent stabilization legislation would help to protect against these extreme increases. Finally, it would hold landlords accountable for maintaining safe and healthy housing. A significant percentage of renter households in Montgomery County are housing cost burdened, and as such, are especially susceptible to economic shocks and evictions. We hear from tenants living in substandard housing they can barely afford daily, and unfortunately, with nowhere else to turn, those with the fewest options are left with the least opportunities. So this is why the Home Opportunity Mobility and Equity Act, introduced by Councilmember Will Jawando and Councilmember Kristen Meek this upcoming Tuesday, is critical. The Home Act strikes an ideal middle ground by helping to protect tenants from extreme rent hikes while also ensuring that landlords can still make reasonable increases in their rent. The Home Opportunity Mobility and Equity Act will be a critical tool in the county's toolbox to fully protect renters with the highest need, protect our local housing market, and save county cost. It will protect tenants like Alma and landlords who raise their rents reasonably and keep more money in the pockets of low-income Montgomery County residents who contribute to our local economy rather than pad the pockets of out-of-county landlords looking to make an unjust profit. And so today I'm here to call on you to take action, to not only protect your community members and your families, but to also protect community members like Alma, to protect our most vulnerable community members. And so we must raise our voices and take immediate action to protect our most vulnerable community members from being displaced. We need to protect our Black and brown communities. We need to protect our working class and essential workers. We need to protect our undocumented families. We need to protect our youth and children from displacement. And above all else, we need to do right by our brothers and sisters who are experiencing homelessness, and we need to bring them home. And so I want to close out with a chant. It's going to be pretty simple. When I say rent, you say stabilization. Rent! Stabilization! Rent! Stabilization. When I say housing, you say justice. Housing! Justice. Housing! Justice. When I say home, you say act. Home! Act. Home! Act. Home! Act. Home! Act. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to Alex and Alma for sharing that experience and for bringing up the energy in the room. Next, I will pass it on to Amir Hassan, a member of Young People for Progress, a group working to end police brutality in Montgomery County. Please give a round of applause.
Hello, everyone. Hi, my name is Amira Hassan, and I'm the Secretary for Young People for Progress. We are a youth and young adult civic and advocacy organization here in Montgomery County with members 13 to 34 years old. We started organizing in 2019 to build political power and better the lives of young people, particularly young people of color. I'm honored to speak with you today as a lifelong Blazer to share my story about how affordable housing has benefited my life. As background, I grew up in the Indonesian community in the DMV. The Indonesian community is primarily comprised of working class, first-generation immigrants. While my family was fortunate enough to own their home, this was unusual for our community. Most of our family friends were and are renters. But despite systemic economic challenges, we are extremely proud of where we come from. I have never felt confused or ashamed of my heritage because of the many cultural and social events that Indonesians hosted throughout my youth. Today, the center of the Indonesian Muslim community is still in Montgomery County in downtown Silver Spring at the mosque. The vibrancy of our community is possible because of the underlying material conditions in the county, housing affordability. When families live closer together and have stable living conditions, it's easier to see them in person, to support them in times of hardship, and to maintain ties with them. However, I now know several families that have moved out of the county entirely to places like Anne Arundel County or Charles County or beyond because they can no longer afford to live here.
Is the mic on?
Is it?
Oh, my bad.
I'm so sorry about that.
So recently, I had my first jarring experience with a rent increase. My roommate and I initially paid $17.50 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment. When our annual lease was newly presented, it jumped to $2,000 a month. That's $150 or a 7.5% rent increase. Publicly available data for my unit shows that the rent will only continue to increase at that rate, if not more. After a couple of years, I expect that my roommate and I will have to move. We're actually going to move at the end of October when our lease is up. And a couple of years after that, we'll have to move again, and again, and again. Unfortunately, this is a common occurrence among young people. The idea that any of us can afford a 1-bedroom apartment on a single income, let alone a minimum wage, is a non-starter. In fact, it's even laughable. I consider myself lucky that I can afford my unit for now, but the fact remains that my housing is unstable. It is difficult for me to set the foundation for the rest of my life when I am forcibly rootless. This is not emotionally or financially sustainable. The problem is exacerbated for low-income individuals and working-class families like those that I grew up with. So the result is displacement along racialized lines. Housing rent stabilization is 100% a racial and economic justice issue. The county now has a critical opportunity to pass a rent control bill so that families can stay in the county, contribute to the local economy and culture, and thrive. You will hear many stories like mine in the next couple of hours, and if you haven't submitted your story to the QR code, please do so right now. YPP urges the council to pass a rent stabilization bill, the HOME Act, immediately to protect the community. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm sorry about the mic.
Thank you so much, Amira, for sharing how rent hikes have affected the Asian American community. So next we're going to have Celestia, who is part of the Montgomery County Green New Deal internship, who is co-hosting with us today. And they are a group of high schoolers who are fighting for affordable housing and for Green New Deal policies. So please welcome Celestia.
Hello, my name is Celestia, and I'm here today on behalf of the Montgomery County Green New Deal program to speak about an issue that affects so many of us in our daily lives: the rising cost of rent and the lack of stable housing options in our community. For so many, searching for an affordable place to live in Montgomery County can be a difficult challenge. And this challenge is exemplified for those of us who are low income, who are students, or who are starting out in our careers. And unfortunately, this challenge is becoming increasingly difficult to overcome. I want to share with you the story of a young woman who I recently spoke with at my last rent stability canvassing event. She had moved to Montgomery County from Dallas, Texas. She lived in an apartment complex that seemed affordable with a monthly rent of $700, but had to move due to personal circumstances. After arriving in Montgomery County, her rent had increased hundreds of dollars to $1,700 per month. To make matters worse, the maintenance at her complex was not always up to a livable standard. We heard from other families who have had to deal with a faulty heating system during the winter months. Even after several complaints were filed, they were left with only a space heater granted by their landlord. And to us, it is evident that the stress of living in an unstable and poorly maintained environment takes an immense toll on our health and well-being. This is something my family has struggled with in the past as well, and these stories are just one example of the challenges that so many of us face when it comes to finding stable and affordable housing in Montgomery County. But we can do something about it. Rent stability and stable housing are crucial for building strong and stable and healthy communities. When people have a stable place to live, they are better able to focus on their work, their education, and their families. They are more likely to be able to afford basic necessities like food, healthcare, and transportation. And they are less likely to experience the stress and anxiety that come with living in unstable situations. That's why I'm calling on all of us to work together to advocate for policies that promote rent stability and stable housing in Montgomery County. We need to ensure that everyone has access to affordable and safe housing, regardless of their income or background. This may mean advocating for rent control policies that limit rent increases and protect tenants from arbitrary evictions. It may mean supporting the development of more affordable housing options in our communities, including cooperative housing models and community land trusts. And it may mean working with local government officials to strengthen and enforce housing codes and standards to ensure that all residents have access to safe and healthy living environments. Most importantly, solving this issue means coming together as a community to support one another and to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to thrive. Let's work together to make Montgomery County a place where everyone can afford to live, work, and raise a family. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, much to Celestia for sharing how rent hikes have affected us and our families. I would next like to call up Gibson to share his story. So please give a round of applause.
Thank you very much, Zoe. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gibson Holman. I'm a senior citizen who came to this country as a resettled refugee with my beautiful handicapped daughter who's here somewhere. All right, can you all hear me now? Firstly, I want to say, before I continue, I want to say thank you for everybody who's here today. Your attendance makes a difference. Can you give yourselves a hand? A quick background. I fled a country where the economy was having a runaway effect. A house today was $100 to rent. By the time the week was over, you were paying $500 for the same rental of that same property. That's a totally different place in the world back in time. But what I find myself confronted with, as somebody who was given an opportunity to come and live the quote-unquote American dream and find the opportunity to find stability, I now walk right into the middle of a situation where we find ourselves in a very insecure, neurotic, and obviously we're trying to build an economy that's sustainable. But right now, the way things are going, we find ourselves in a dispensation of time where those who have are preying on those who don't have. So for a minute, I stopped and I thought about it. We the people elect people to help manage our affairs, correct? But we the people who are being negatively impacted are finding that the very key officials that we elect are struggling to help us to stay alive. So if this is the way things are going, are we now going to be left with a ghost county? Is that what we are advocating for? By all means, build houses, build property, make a profit, but make a reasonable profit. It's tough enough when people come to us and ask us to vote them in office, and then when we place you in office, the things that we need to notice, I'm not saying want, I'm saying need to have done so that we can continue to build the pride of our county, are not even able to do it. There is a problem. As I speak to you right now, I need a solution. My daughter and I are homeless. We are living in a shelter accommodation. I'm thankful that the county gave me that place to stay. But in all intents and purposes, they have issued a letter indicating that you can only be in that place for so long. And I understand why. But here's the sad thing, and where does rent stabilization come into this? Over the last 6 months, we have been trying to find a place to live. You walk in on Monday, the rent is $1,000. You come back again on Wednesday, it's $1,500. Now, excuse me, we all went through COVID. Nobody was exempt from it. The very landlords and management agencies that are running these establishments were given bailouts in a sense to help them cope with the challenges they had. Then they come back to our very elected officials and kick them in the teeth again. By doing what? By attacking the very public that placed our officials into office. That's not fair. Can somebody say that's not fair? That's not fair. And all we're looking for at the end of the day is to be treated in a humane, dignified manner as citizens of this county. But here's the problem. We're now having people from our community, black, white, brown, yellow, doesn't matter what color, having to relocate to other places. So in other words, our illustrious leadership told us that this was an affordable county to live in. Am I right? That sits on our preamble of our mission statement as a county. Is this place still sustainable? No. I don't think I can hear you. No. I can't hear you. No. Come on. No. So if it's not sustainable, what is it then? Unaffordable. All I'm really saying, we are not asking for people not to make a profit. Make a decent profit. But I can tell you what I'm definitely seeing here is a situation that until we rectify our housing situation and we start developing units where people can afford to come in, students leaving and transitioning in life can come to a place they can say, this is my place in between a place. I can build my base and move forward from. The current system is not sustainable. And by the way, when most of these developers come into the county, they come with a phenomenal amount of promises to our leadership and to our executive, telling them how they're here to benefit our community. But when the rubber hits the road, that is not the case. They sell us out at every opportunity. Somebody say, that's not fair.
That's not fair.
We need change.
We need change.
We need change now.
We need change now.
Homelessness. I never thought I'd find myself in this place again. But I am here. In one respect, I'm glad that I walked through it. Because in the institution that I've been placed in right now, I listen to the stories on the corridors. Mothers with children, people with sick people that cannot sustain themselves, and they cannot find a place to rent because the rental dispensation is out of whack. They become a law unto themselves, a unique society, a bourgeois of their own, who feel that they can do what they like and mismanage the very people that they call part of their community. So for me, rent stabilization is real. It's not a joke. In closing, this past week, my daughter and I found an apartment that we thought we could rent. Signed the papers, took it to our case manager. Our case manager went back to them by the midweek, and the property had hiked by $200. So if I'm only told I can have about $1,600 as the state wants to host me until I can get some stability, with these continual hikes, will I ever leave the program? No. Do I want to stay in the program? No. So what are we going to do about managing the program? We need to get rent stabilization, because it impacts everything that we are doing in government. It impacts everything that we are doing in our society. It has everything to do with the social causes that we need to manage. And if we can't manage our business properly, then what are we doing in power? I believe I'm sitting with a group of people here that are looking for a solution. And we are the solution. The question is, do we want to work together? No man is an island to himself. We need each other. So if somebody can shout me, rent stabilization!
Rent stabilization!
I need the roof to go off. Rent stabilization!
Rent stabilization!
We need it now!
We need it now!
Bless you.
Thank you so much to all our speakers for those incredibly powerful voices. We appreciate every single one of you. And now I would like to call up the council members, the county executive, and Naeem's already here, but to start the Q&A part of our panel. So if you have any questions, please share them, and I'll just pass it over.
Yes, thank you very much, Zoe. Apologies, our mic cords are intense today. So yes, today we have Councilmember Kristen Mink from District 5. Pleased to welcome her here today. And we also have County Executive Mark Elrich, who is the executive for the entire county. And we would also like to welcome up Ezra Pines from the office of Councilmember Lori-Ann Sales. Councilmember Sales wanted to be here today. She could not be, but Ezra will be standing in her stead here. Oh, that's my seat. Sorry, this cord is not that long. I appreciate it. Furthermore, we'd like to just mention and give a shout out to Councilmember Kate Stewart from District 4. She was here briefly, and I think a number of you were able to speak with her. She represents this district as well. She wanted to be here due to a small miscommunication and, council members having their busy schedules. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to stay for the panel, but she really wanted to. So since she's not able to be here, we just want to give her a shout out for being a champion of rent stabilization for a number of years, even back in Tacoma Park, where rent stabilization has existed very successfully for some time. And also to give her credit for working very closely to try to support tenants who were affected by recent fires in this district. So can we have a little round of applause for Councilmember Kate Stewart? She's not here at the moment. Okay, I'm gonna try not to shout into this so I don't deafen our elected officials. Okay, so how this panel is going to work is that we have a couple of questions that our team really wanted to ask the council members, so we're gonna be starting out with those. But the vast majority of this time is going to be for you all. So if you have a particular question, or if you just had an experience related to rent increases, or housing insecurity, or housing justice, or anything, or injustice, or anything of the sort, you're also welcome to just share your experience and basically ask your council members who are up here, and the executive as well, what they're going to do about it. And they're here to support you and to support us. So it's going to be an interesting time. Just a couple of notes. Depending on how long things start to go, we may start timing the responses a little bit, but we trust that folks can be concise, so hopefully they won't make us do that. But if we do start timing things, Brooke will be doing that for us. And just a quick reminder, if you do need Spanish language interpretation, Angela is seated over there, and Regina is also there, and they will be able to provide Spanish language interpretation to anybody who needs that. So you can make your way over there if you need that service, and they'll support you with that. So without further ado, we're going to get started with our little pre-prepared questions. Oh, let me get the mic for the council members. So just one moment. Perfect. If we could just get like a really brief intro, if each of you just wants to say, who you are and who you represent, and if you're on a committee, just to get an idea of who you are, that'd be great. But let's keep that brief so we can get to the questions.
Hi, my name is Kristen Mink. I represent District 5, which runs from the Four Corners area up through East County to Burtonsville. It also loops out west to include Leisure World. And I am on the Education and Culture Committee, as well as the Public Safety Committee. I'm also a Montgomery Blair alum. And I am very proud to have just introduced, or to be about to introduce on Tuesday, a rent stabilization bill with Councilmember Will Jawando that we worked on very closely with County Executive Mark Elrich. So thank you so much for your continued advocacy, and looking forward to the conversation.
I'm Mark Elrich. I'm Montgomery County Executive. My kids graduated from Blair, but I went to Einstein. So I've been here a while. I was a city council member in Tacoma Park for 19 years. I was author of the strongest rent stabilization bill probably in the country. And I tried twice when I was on the council to introduce rent stabilization. I couldn't even get a conversation started back then. So I was really happy to be able to work with Kristen and Kate and Lori Ann, council members who actually want to do something, so we can bring forward a bill that's a real bill, not a fake bill, which is the bill that you guys have seen. It's a joke. If you think CPI plus 8% is reasonable, that would be 15% rent increase. That would not be considered gouging right now. It is a gouging licensing bill, not a gouging protection bill. And the bill that's coming from our friends on the council is the kind of bill I think you want to say. These issues are really important to me, and I think it's about time that the county do something. We can't continue to watch the affordable housing erode.
My name is Ezra Pine. I've been working for Councilmember Sales since she took office in December. I want to thank Councilmember Mink and County Executive Elrich for all the hard work they've been doing on this issue, and thank you all for showing up. I grew up in the county, and actually I got my start in just community advocacy with the Sunrise Movement. So just really appreciate you all showing up, and I think just hearing your stories about problems paying rent and just trying to hold landlords accountable, it is so important. It is something that really needs to be a part of this whole process as the county continues to discuss rent stabilization and other important housing initiatives. So look forward to hearing from you all, and thank you for organizing a great event.
All right. Thank you all very much for being here. Yeah, sorry, we can't have both mics on at the same time since this is a massive cafeteria. Normally it's fine, but we have a great crowd and a huge space, so we're going to make it work. I'll turn my mic off when I finish asking the question. So our first question, I hope, is not too complex a question. The question is, do you support the HOME Act?
I will start. Do not have an official position from Councilmember Sales at the time. I know both Councilmember Mink and County Executive Elrich are sponsors on the bill, so you have an answer there. But I don't want to speak on behalf of Councilmember Sales, but I know she is still working on putting together a position at the time, and I know she has met with members of Sunrise Silver Spring and Renters Alliance and other community groups. So. Any information you'll give, I will pass it along and make sure it's a part of our position when she does take an official position on the bill.
Very uncomplicated, yes.
Having authored it with Mark Elrich and Will Juando, yes, absolutely, and excited to work with you all to hopefully get it passed. Loving the signs.
All right. Y'all, let me just say, people who give a yes to a question like that rather than a million words, that's certainly appreciated. All right, so thank you for sharing that. Our next question, we only have a couple more of these before we go to the audience, is that many tenants have told us that a 3% increase, as in the HOME Act, is acceptable, but that the 8% increase of Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez's extreme bill would cause them to sacrifice food or childcare or potentially more than that, other necessities. So what would you say to tenants who are worried that Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez's extreme proposal would force them to give up basic necessities? Because that's what we're often hearing.
Yeah, we worked closely with the community, with community advocates, with tenants, with labor unions to make sure that our bill was informed by the needs of the community in addition to what is going to be economically and financially responsible for the county as a whole. So I feel very confident about the 3% number that we ended up at. I would be extremely concerned about 8%, and to be clear, that bill is not just 8%, it's going to be more than 8%. It's 8% plus CPI, which is a measure of inflation, and as the county executive mentioned, that would take us to about 15% at this point. There is no top limit, so what depends on what the CPI is that particular year. Could be higher, could be lower, so you also lose the predictability, which is something that homeowners by and large have. With a fixed rate mortgage, you're able to plan out your finances for your family. And renters right now in Montgomery County do not have that predictability, and that is also an important part of this bill. So it's not just what range of numbers are we ending up at, it's that ability to plan. So for me, where I am, I think that this bill, that the 8% plus CPI bill would be worse than nothing, because it's going to give many landlords a license to raise rents higher than they would have otherwise. We have had voluntary rent guidelines in place in this county since the 80s. Over the last 20 years, those voluntary rent guidelines have averaged 3%. So the 3% number is very much in line with the standards that the county has set and has held for decades at this point. And there are landlords that stick to that number. And now suddenly we're going to say, if you're sticking to 8% plus CPI, you're not rent gouging, and that's okay. That's an enormous leap now that we've given folks a license to implement. So I think very problematic, very concerning.
I agree with what she said. This is, largely a guaranteed massive increase. And, when I was testifying in the minimum wage bill a couple of days ago in Annapolis and supporting Governor Moore's proposal, one of the Secretary of Labor said that in Maryland, the average rent increase over 30 years was 2.4%. So if it stayed at 2.4%, which obviously it's not at right now, that still guarantees a minimum of 10.4% in terms of rent increase, which is inexcusable. And if you think about it, this is really class warfare, and it defines the difference between a homeowner and the renter really clearly, because to tell the truth, many people are paying rents that are equivalent to mortgages that are people pay. The difference is your mortgage is stable. If you've got a fixed rate mortgage, you pay what you pay, and other than changes in property taxes, that's pretty much your level payment. You can count on that. Somebody else who can afford the rent today won't be able to afford it later with these rent increases. It's an experience that no homeowner has. And it's just fundamentally wrong to put one group of people who happen to be more likely to be people of color, more likely to be women, and more likely to be lower income, to put them in a position where they can't have any stability in their housing, something which is pretty much guaranteed to homeowners. So I look at this as just so basically and fundamentally wrong what the majority of the council apparently is trying to do, that I will veto that bill. I will not. And even though our voluntary guidelines can be good, they don't guarantee anything. And that's the problem. If they meant anything, you wouldn't be looking at the rate increases that you're seeing right now. So obviously, they're toothless. And it's time for us to have a law that sets rents at a reasonable level that has teeth. I want to give you an example of something that I'm going to prepare a spreadsheet for all my friends to use. But in normal net operating income in an apartment building is about 60%, which is 60% of the rent. That's what you get left over after your expenses, which are about 40%. So 60% net operating income on a $1,500 apartment is about $900. Your expenses are about $600, and your operating income is about $900. If your expenses had a 4% increase on the $500, there's $600. 4% of $600 is $24. If you give them a 10% rent increase on a $1,500 unit, they get a $150. So to cover an increase in their costs of $24, they're asking you to give them $150. If that's not a license to steal, I don't know what is. So you should not be blushing.
Don't have much to add from those responses. I think the only thing I would just say is, really just making sure we're avoiding the displacement of residents. Rent is already just so expensive, and people have such a difficult time living in the county. I think that's just an incredibly important consideration, and I'll echo from County Executive Elrich and Councilmember Mink.
All right. Thank you very much for sharing those insights. Do we have a... Great. So we're glad to have gotten your insights so far. But now we want to give you a chance to speak with everybody in the audience who's come out here today and who's been affected. So Zoe has a wireless mic. She is awesome. And she can come to you. So if you raise your hand and you have a specific question or an experience that you want to share with the council members, she'll come to you and you can share that so that they can provide their response and really be responsive to the concerns that you are having.
Thank you once again. I'm not sure if this is a question or more an observation, but thank you all for being here. To our illustrious leader, thank you so much, sir, for availing yourself this afternoon to be here. We appreciate it. I think the issue for me, I think for most people here, is that we are coming through the recovery of an economy, not just in terms of our nation, but also in terms of where we sit as a county. We've seen a lot of common industry within our own county shut down. We are trying to garnish a situation where we're trying to take the few resources that we have to try and rebuild our economy. This county has a very proud heritage and one that they need to be proud of. By maintaining the status of being one of the richest counties within the confines of the entire United States, the current dispensation that we find ourselves in with the rent regime is causing an erosion of the most crucial asset that we have, and that's our human resource. You talk about 3% as a past historical figure. Are we talking about sustaining 3%? Are we looking at 3% as being a maximum that should be allowed? Because what I'm trying to say here is that we should be talking less than 3% when it comes to any form of rent increase. I think that's the direction we need to be going. And gradually, as we become stronger as a county, then we can start to look towards going back towards the 3% margin. That's really my observation and my take on the matter. But if we start talking about working on 3% as this is the cap or this is the starting point, then we're really giving those the opportunity to run towards the 15, 18, and even 20, maybe even 50%. So I think if the conversation can begin as 3% is a very maximum, but we can work a little bit further down, then we can do something. You're going to have the vote of the public, and I think you're going to have the confidence of the public to actually help you to drive the vehicle that you're trying to drive, and that is to bring back Montgomery County to beyond its former place and glory.
Thank you, Gibson, for that question and for your remarks earlier as well. You're in luck because that is the bill. So the 3% is the absolute ceiling. The number will vary. It will sometimes be lower. If we look at the average actually over the last, so the bill, to be clear, sets the cap at the voluntary rent guidelines. That is a term that refers to a number that has existed in Montgomery County for a few decades. It's based on a particular measure of inflation that's localized and more specific to housing. That number over the last 10 years has averaged 2.25%. It has sometimes been below 1%. So whatever number that is what the cap would be that year. Except that we say even if that number rises above 3%, the most it can be is 3%. So our bill, the Home Act, does set a ceiling of 3%. That is the most it can be. We hope that it falls below that with great frequency. The other bill sets a floor. It sets no ceiling, it sets a floor. The lowest it will ever be is 8% if inflation was 0. So it's 8% plus inflation. It has a floor and no ceiling. What we need is a bill that has a ceiling, which is low, and no floor.
So the thing we have to do legally is not pass a bill that becomes an economic taking. In our experience in Tacoma Park, when I got elected, we had a rent stabilization bill, and we were taken to court, and that happens. And we were going to lose the court case. In fact, we had lost the court case, and we had to make adjustments to our bill. And the basic principle that the justice or the legal system will say is you cannot set rents at a level where a landlord can't make money. And so you can't set it at a point automatically, knowing that if the costs rise above inflation, that they have no means of recovering it. So the bill has to have enough flexibility in it to deal with individual cases. And the thing I like about this bill, you tie it to a percentage which should exceed most normal years, and if individual landlords have particular economic circumstances in terms of the level of repairs they had to do, they can appeal on an individual basis, but only to recover costs, not to get inflation plus 8%. But the law has to have some flexibility. If it doesn't, we lose it in court, and then we're back to where we are today, which is no law at all. And so, my view on this was to make sure we wrote it in a way that it was legally defensible. And this one is legally defensible. I was told by somebody who hates the law that it was legally defensible. I enjoyed that.
Just have nothing else to add. That was good.
All right. We have somebody over here. Perfect.
Okay, I think you didn't expect a landlord to be here, right? But I qualify as a tiny landlord. Prince George's County had a 3% raise, and I embraced it. And I'm a landlord because we have a small house in Barwin Heights area that we decided to live first, but then we moved to Montgomery County, so we have to pay the mortgage and rent that house. My tenants are there, normal people. My tenants work in Walgreens. One works in a KFC, the other one a retiree. During the past 5 years, I did not raise the rent. I'm not a landlord. I hate the word lord in there, okay? It's just a property owner. So what am I saying? I'm sharing my human experience and the reality. The reality is that I talk to my tenants. When I talk to go to emergency room, he calls me because I'm his emergency contact, okay? And he told me that my rent will be a little late. I said, that's fine, don't worry about the 5% in the lease, if you are late. So this is what I'm saying. This is for county executive and the legislator here. Not all landlords are developers. And so you have to distinguish developers over the landlord. And what we need in Montgomery County is that to enable people live in a place they can spend the night, spend the day, go to work, raise their kids. That is a value. So one way you can do it is that maybe that 3% raise that is coming, maybe just give them a voucher, that's $100, depending on their income level, and have a streamlined process to get that monthly voucher for interim basis to those people. Right now, the rental process, even getting a rental license, is not streamlined. It does have some hoops. And I'll give an example. Like in Prince George's County, right? They say that now you have to put fire alarm in every room. And you know what I did? My tenants are so nice. I said, Ron, here are three fire alarms. I bought it for you, 10 years battery. He said, I'm going to put it in all the rooms, one of my tenants. So I'm not a businessman. I'm just a human being. And I know that I'm serving other human beings. I'm serving this society. I'm serving this country. So that's my human experience. If you want to incorporate in your executive decision in day-to-day business or in your laws, I'm with you. And I'm going to support you at the ballot box.
So certainly, when they get clarity on that point, are you saying you support the 3% in Montgomery County?
It is okay. 3%, I'm okay with 3% in Prince George's County. And I'm not going to the 500 rent by 15% this year. No, I don't need it. It's okay. I can live with it.
Thank you so much for those thoughtful comments. And yeah, we need landlords, and we need ethical landlords like you. Folks, we have renters here, and if all of them could have ethical landlords, such as what you've described, we wouldn't have to write this bill. And so for those ethical landlords who are making responsible decisions and who interact with their tenants on a human-to-human basis, the hope is that they're not really going to be impacted by this bill because they are already setting reasonable increases or no increases as the case may be. This is to put a cap for those landlords who are going to be taking it too high, which it sounds like you are not doing, and that is so appreciated, and your voice is so powerful and so important, and we need to include it in the conversation because that is the counterpoint to the landlords who will say it is impossible to be a landlord, it is impossible to stay in business without allowing us to do 5, 10, 15% increases. And it's just not true. And you prove that, and there are other landlords who prove that. So I appreciate you raising your voice to lift that up. All landlords absolutely are not bad people, and we need them. And thank you for being someone who is willing to take that on and to share your story. And absolutely, as we look for ways to make it easier to function as a landlord, and some of those pieces that you mentioned, that's a conversation that we're absolutely happy to have as well.
Right, thank you for that. Other members of the community, anybody want to share any experiences you've had? Okay. If you turn it on, it'll light up.
Thank you for giving me such an opportunity to talk to in front of everyone. When I was hearing the story, I was almost about to cry, everybody's story. And when I came to this country, I was renter, and I really had to work hard, to keep up with the, rent increase. But somehow I got over my problem. Now I'm kind of like a little bit non-landlord. But actually, I want to talk about somebody else. I know somebody, she's very close to mine, and she's a small landlord. Somehow she lost her job. So she kind of depend on the renters. So I really appreciate, I really agree with the 3% increase of the rental. But at the same time, actually how Honorable Executive mentioned that we should have some consideration about the landlord with certain economical condition. Not everybody's condition is same. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. Looks like we have some hands over there, and especially if you're a tenant or if you're somebody who's directly affected by these increases, please do put your hands in the air and share how this has affected you in your life.
I just want to say, we know that the MCPS budget is about to come up to the council. You're gonna have to vote on it, and it's big. We know that it is very big. And an important consideration, less of a question, is that a rent stabilization affects everything, including this budget. If you know, council members, if you don't support how big the MCPS budget is, I want you to consider the fact, maybe use it at the council table. I won't unfortunately be able to make the meeting, that rent stabilization is support for MCPS students. If you go into our bathrooms here at Blair, I go here, I'm a sophomore, you will see that we have signs up lovely put up by Miss Faina Babian, who is our parent community coordinator, and she has support for homeless students. Homeless students have special transportation exemptions, they have special meal exemptions, they have special support for everything, which is really important. And if we can decrease the amount of homeless students, the amount of students who are living in unstable housing, and the amount of students who are just not able to go home every day, we can ensure that we are not spending as much money as we currently are. I think that's it.
So I want to thank you for your comment, and I look at rent stabilization actually from the point of view as a teacher. I was a council member in Tacoma Park when I was teaching elementary school at Rolling Terrace Elementary School down the street. And what you see is, the kids who lived in Tacoma Park were more likely to stay in their schools for a longer period of times because their parents weren't always looking for the next cheapest apartment because we had rent stabilization. And so you knew what your rent was and you could stay there. In schools where the rest of the county, people talk about the high mobility rates in Montgomery County. People aren't moving because they want to move, because that would be weird that only renters want to move every year or two and everybody else wants to stay in their house for 30 years. It's because they move because they're trying to find a rent they can afford. And that's destabilizing to neighborhoods. It's destabilizing to families. It's not good for kids because, you have friends and then you don't have friends anymore. You know the school and then you don't know the school anymore. And I looked at it because I live off of Flower Avenue. My neighborhood when I moved there was, in Montgomery County, it was the lowest income tract in Montgomery County with the highest percentage of single female-headed households. That's the neighborhood I live in. And I know what this means to those families to have to move, and it takes food off the table. And when we would debate this at the city council, I would talk about, you give somebody, what amounts to a $50 a month rent increase. Back in the day when you could buy a bag of groceries for $12, that's like bags of groceries, literally off the table of people trying to feed their families. And that's the human side of this. I mean, we can talk about numbers and percentages and profits, but the fact is, for the people who need it most, this is something that takes food off the table and destabilizes the kids, and it has impacts academically on them at school. So there are other reasons to do this other than economic justice, flat out social justice.
Thank you so much for that point, and I'll just add on that, two things. One is that you're completely right. I'm a former teacher, and I saw this when I was teaching. It doesn't matter what your homework is or when it's due. That's like a ridiculous conversation to have with someone who doesn't know if they're going to have a home next month, or somebody who doesn't have enough to eat because their family is struggling to pay their rent. So for students, teachers are seeing this in schools every day. Housing, rent stabilization is a critically important issue. Evictions in this county, so we had temporary rent stabilization during the pandemic. That was lifted this past August. And our eviction numbers have changed dramatically just in that time. Our most recent data from this past February, last month, there were, let me tell you what it was actually last February, so we can look at the year over year. Last February, when the temporary rent stabilization was in place, there were 35 scheduled evictions. Already too many. 35 scheduled evictions last February. Okay, this February, last month now, in the wake of those restrictions being lifted, 380 evictions scheduled. 380. Those are all families. Those are neighbors. Those are kids trying to attend school. Those are parents trying to put food on the table. Grandparents trying to pay for their medications. 380 families facing that level of trauma and destruction to their lives. And that's because our council made a policy choice not to continue with the rent stabilization that we already had in place that had kept it, again, already too high, but at 35. So Yes, you're absolutely right. And I think what you mentioned about those signs being in the bathrooms here, and I want to get a photo of that before I leave, is critically important because it speaks to this being a widespread issue. I was having a conversation with a colleague who is currently on the 8% plus CPI bill, who told me this is, an issue, this housing instability that is not a widespread problem. He said there are stories, there's individual people, but those stories are not representative of a large scale problem. Like there's advocates going out and cherry picking, the 10 people or something that have this story. So hearing reflections like that, where it's like, okay, at Blair, we just have posters up in the bathroom for all the homeless students who need support. Here's who you contact. That's very telling. And if I could have your attention for a strategic point for a moment that speaks to that, these bills are both getting introduced on Tuesday. That means we're going to have a lot of media coming out of that moment. And we want to bring as many voices to the table to counter points like this is not a widespread problem as possible. So I realize that many of you are going to be in school that day. For those of you who have grown-ups who are available, or for those of you who are adults who are going to be available at that time, we'd love to have you at the council building. 9:30 a.m. is when these two bills are going to get introduced. 9:30 a.m. on Tuesday. We would love to have a sea of folks out there holding up signs that say the Home Act on it. And we would love for press to see that, and we would love for press who is there to then come and ask you, why do you care about this, and why is this important to you? And then at noon, so you could come to both or come to either, at noon we're going to be holding a press conference. This is important, if I may. We want to pass this bill, right? Okay, that's great. At noon we have a press conference, which we're going to talk more about later. So that's another opportunity for you to be there. If you can't be at either, or even if you can, we would love to include your voice in the conversation. And so I'm going to give you an email address right now. So text this email address to a friend or type it into your notes if you could. I'll give you a second to grab your phone. If you want to type up a little letter, whether it's a paragraph or a page, whatever you want to send, and send it to my office, we will highlight your story. So our email address, our office email address is councilmember, COUNCIL, member, .mink at Montgomery County, councilmember.mink at Montgomery County MD.gov. Would love to have your stories, and especially something like that speaks to this being a widespread problem and so on, but just your individual stories as well is important. And send it to me, and we will highlight your story. If we're able to get those by like Sunday night, Monday morning, we can make sure that they are highlighted on Tuesday. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. We are probably going to start keeping time just a little bit. All great information.
Don't blast that out on social media. Thank you. Just go ahead, just talk about it with your friend. Don't blast that out. Thank you.
This is being live streamed on Instagram right now.
That's fine. That's fine. That's what it is. I'm just saying you don't need to make a point about making a big announcement about it. It's okay that it's not a secret. I'm just saying you don't need to go and blast it far and wide further than it's already going, that particular part. Thank you.
And we have a hand in the back, so we would love to hear from our next audience member. So.
I'm going to be quick because I have a code. I'm Princess, and I'm so thankful that you organized this event today, so thank you to our volunteers for your participation as well. I'm on a federal witness protection unit. The reason I'm on a federal witness protection unit is medical malpractice, and a foreigner wrote KKK on my property in Montgomery County, Maryland. The foreigner is a Hispanic. The Hispanic was arrested in this county. The arresting officer did not complete the job of incarcerating the person. I was uprooted out of my house. I'm a caregiver, and I had to relocate my mother to another residence. I reported the incident to a lawyer who was a high-profile individual. My lawyer decided not to take the case because she did not understand the magnitude of the crime, how many individuals were involved in the KKK incident. She was not scared, but she didn't want to get involved in that level of crime. It is the FBI job to provide security to anyone on a federal witness protection unit. For my family, my friends, my affiliates, my associates, and the people I love. And one of their primary functions is relocation. I'm asking for the Montgomery County Council to move me into housing immediately. It does not take 5 years to move a person in a residence in the United States of America when you report the crime to the FBI, which is one of the highest federal government agencies of integrity in North America. I learned that the Hispanics wrote KKK on several properties in this country. It was your goal to obtain the White House. You don't need the White House. You have the entire continent of South America. My goddaughter is Hispanic. She is not going to grow up in this country learning that you need to take the White House to achieve success. I asked the Hispanics to call off the war.
Excuse me, if I could
And I
just...
believe in this country. So I'm asking the Montgomery County Council to move me into a residence. You can get the money from the Hispanic Council of America. You can get the money from the states.
Zoe, you can, we can address the points that you raised about...
Okay, I want to move immediately into a brand new residence. I have sensitive skin. Do not place me in another dirty hotel. The address is 8130 Wisconsin Avenue, Bethesda, Maryland. And Hispanics, you can live a great life in this country.
Go ahead.
You don't have to kill and steal.
Excuse
The
me.
Puerto Rican-United States War was 1.5 years. The Hispanics are listening to me in Silver Spring.
With all due respect, we can appreciate the housing concerns that you've gone through, and we can address those here, but I'm afraid that we can't stand here and allow you to propagate stereotypes that are simply not true about entire groups of people. So I'm afraid that none of the bigoted remarks that we're hearing are true. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your concerns. We will be happy to talk to you about your concerns. We'll be happy to. My friend, we will be happy. We will be happy. I would like to hear your personal story, but I'm having trouble hearing you now. If you could wait until after, so, yep. If you can wait, I'm happy. We're happy to listen to you after this and hear your story. Thank you. Happy to talk to you after this event. Thank you. Thank you. We're gonna turn it over to another question so that we can hear your story in full later. Thank you. I think I see another question up in the front, up here. Did you want to use this mic? Sorry. Thank you.
So you can bring the mic. I'll turn it back on. Oh, okay. So we have other questions first. No problem. One moment.
Thank you so much. Thank you. This is a question, it's actually directed to Mr. Ezra. I understand your boss hasn't taken a position, so you're not going to be able to answer my question here, but I would really like you to take this question to Councilmember Sales. My name is Zach Branduita. Some of you may know me. About 10 years ago, my mother suffered a stroke, and I ended up in the service sector because I had to support her financially. And the thing about that is it becomes a trap, right? It sucks up your time, it sucks up your energy, and you're not able to save to take the risk of finding a better job. And the only way I could even afford to stay in Montgomery County was that I was renting a room in a group house in Glenmont. It was like $450 a month, so it was very cheap, but it was cheap for a reason, because that place was infested with rats. It was infested with mice, it was infested with roaches, and we had some issues with some of our roommates sometimes, and a couple times one of them became somewhat violent. Now, I got very lucky. I met the woman who became my wife. I was able to sort of get out of that situation. One of the only reasons I could even get through that situation at all was that then Councilmember Elrich passed a minimum wage increase bill that really helped us. But my wife can't marry everyone in Montgomery County. If I had not been young, if I had not been single, if I had children, I don't know what I would have done. I don't know what a family facing a 15% rent increase today would do. I can't imagine someone in that situation renting a room in a vermin-infested house. So my question is, and this is a question I really want you to just share with the council member and really ask her to think about, what are they supposed to do if the Home Act doesn't pass? Should they move into a house that's infested with vermin and rent a single room? What are they supposed to do? Thank you.
Hello. Hi, my name's Colleen O'Connor. I'm a member of the Democratic Socialists of America, and I'm here as a tenant. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate this, and I appreciate you writing and introducing the Home Act. It's really, really impressive. I've really enjoyed this event so far today for the most part. I think we've heard a lot of really powerful personal stories from people who are really at the mercy of their landlords and or capitalism and are really just struggling to get by and stay in their homes and stay in their school districts. And I think my question, I'm an optimist. I think that you're gonna pass this, and I guess my question a little bit is in line with what Gibson was talking about, just where do we go beyond this as well, and where do you see Montgomery County going to ensure that this is a county that is for everyone? I think, I'm an attorney. I'm here in a personal capacity, but I represent tenants, and I think sometimes landlord attorneys or people in the real estate industry will talk about things like rent stabilization or rent control or rental assistance or what have you as an encroachment on freedom or as a more extreme policy. But I think what we've heard here today is it's pretty plain that the status quo is the extreme policy, that people not having housing is very extreme, that people being forced out of their school districts, that 350 families in February being removed from their homes by sheriffs, that is a very extreme set of policies. And
a 3% increase on $2,000 a month rent is honestly a very moderate policy. It's not an extreme policy, right? And so I'd be interested in hearing from you all. I really appreciate this bill, and I'm excited to see what else comes on what you would like to see to make this a place for everyone. Thank you.
Before the executive goes, can we get a timer for 1 minute for each lovely person up on you?
I can't answer that question in a minute.
A minute and 15 seconds?
That question? Of what
A
you're
minute
doing
and-
going forward?
A minute and 30 seconds.
So, I don't have a limit how long I can be here, but okay, quickly. One, a no net loss of affordable housing. If you are a developer and you're going to tear down existing affordable housing, you have to replace it unit by unit at the same rents with long-term protections, along with additional units for growth. If you're building flat-out new buildings, I'm going to call it something like the Complete Communities Housing Act. Our moderately priced dwelling unit program, which is the only real program he has, produces between 12.5% or 15% of new buildings with units that are affordable to people making 60 to 75% of area median income, meaning if you make $50,000, you can't get it. And also, if you're making $80,000 or $85,000, you can't get it either because you make too much and you still can't find market housing. So what I'm going to propose increases the share from 12.5% to 15%, depending on the council's will, to 30 or 40%. And then the rest would be market. But this would give us a lot larger playing field, and that half the units would be affordable to people below 75% of AMI, and half of them would be affordable to people between 75 and 100% of AMI or something like that. Those are two things. I want to end the ability of developers to buy out of condo requirements. They give us the unit. They say, oh, we give the unit the price you require, but the condo fee is so sad they can't afford it, so they can't live here. And so we'd require them that the price has to include condo fee and unit price. And we actually did 2 deals like this where developers put the increased costs on the market rate units in order to accommodate the affordable people. So to this gentleman's point, not all landlords are impossible to deal with. So those are at least 3 things I can think of doing that we will be sending legislation across the street to do. And another bill to deal with minimum wage, because $15 is so 2015, and we need a wage that gets closer to the living wage.
Thanks a lot, Colleen. So first, I like your optimism. That said, to be clear, like we are launching like a huge fight right now to A, make sure that a bad bill that's going to make things worse doesn't get passed, and then B, to pass something as strong as possible, as close to that 3% cap as we can. And along the way, we're going to have to decide at what point is that number too high that we'd rather just pass nothing. And that's a conversation that we'll remain in communication with the community about. But we're gearing up for a huge fight that really is going to launching on Tuesday. So thank you in advance for those letters, for showing up if you're able to, and like this is going to be a tough struggle. Social housing, I want to give a shout out to, because that kicked off under the previous term. Mark has been a champion of that. We have other folks on the council who are also a fan of that. So we are going to be pouring more and more money, hopefully, into that. That's government-owned housing, and we have seen that already, that the turnover, being able to produce that housing quickly, is very fast. It's really cheap, and we can produce beautiful buildings. And what's great about those government-owned buildings is we can tailor it to exactly what the needs of our community are in terms of the different rates and all of that. So, for the folks who are going to say, well, 3% cap, you're going to have now some landlords or some developers who aren't going to choose Montgomery County. Okay, maybe some. There's actually not any good evidence that shows that there's a real connection there. But if we're seeing a little bit of a discrepancy, well, the county, we are about to be building very rapidly a lot more housing. And as we ask to put more money into that and to find new revenue streams to fund that up, we should have the support of anybody who's concerned that a developer or a real estate lobby might choose to put their resources somewhere else.
obviously, thank you both so much for sharing your stories. Obviously, I'll do my best to try and relay what, if Councilmember Sales was here, what she'd be saying. But, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Yeah, I would say, just to bring in another example, adding, in addition to rent stabilization, I think bringing on what happened with the Arrive fire, what happened with that, I think that really raises an important issue that we need to be making sure that tenants have some of these protections in place. I know Delegate Charcudian is leading a bill at the state level for making sure there are fire sprinklers that are up to date and protect tenants. It was just really awful what happened in that situation, and I know we are looking. Councilmember Kate Stewart has been on the ground a lot, and I know where Councilmember Sales is going to be working with her on legislation to help just make sure there are fire sprinklers at apartments throughout the county. I know that's something specific that we are looking into. And yeah, I know for a position on this bill, I know Councilmember Sales is very much committed to working with County Executive Elrich, Councilmember Mink, Councilmember Jawando. And I think something, I know what this gentleman was saying, working with landlords to have them in this bill and make sure it's something that can be passed. I know that's something that is important, but yeah, that's my best response for her. But again, like I said, I know she's very much is committed, supports many of the ideas that are raised in this bill, and looks forward to working with advocates and landlords to get this bill passed.
All right, so we will be able to go until roughly 2:20 here, perhaps give or take a few minutes depending on how many questions there are, but put your hand up if you have a thought, and we will go with that. Also, you all are very lucky. You came very close to the time limit, so good job.
Yeah, we have 4 more questions, so.
So I just want to share an experience, and so I'm an intern for both the Green New Deal and Lynn Harris, and I also come from a majority school. And I have heard countless of experiences from not just students from my school or other schools, but also friends and family who have been displaced and also have had to sacrifice their studies and academics because of the increase in rent. And it's really frustrating and upsetting to hear that there are many people in schools that have to either take on multiple part-time jobs and sacrifice their studies in order to help their parents pay the increasing rent, and have to sacrifice everything they've worked for, only to be able to know that they'll still have a home to go to after school, to know that they have a place to call home. There have been countless of people who have had to sacrifice other basic necessities to afford a single one. And that's really unfair. We're the generation that's going to carry on the legacies that are being set now. So how is it that we have to sacrifice what we've worked for, what our parents have worked for, just because there aren't any policies set in place that help us achieve a basic necessity that everyone deserves, no matter race, gender, sexual orientation, or anything? So why is it that we still have to be fighting for this when it should have been something that should have already been set in place?
I will say thank you so much for your advocacy and all your thoughts on this issue. I feel like as someone who is a young person, I think that really everything you were saying just kind of speaks to the importance of having young people at the table. And I think the reason why we need policies like this, and the reason why it's not implemented, is because I think too often young people are left out of the table and really don't have an impact on these policy decisions. And it's, the reason we don't have it in place is because, young people are so often left out, and, people who are just so impacted by these issues don't have a seat at the table, and just speaks to the importance of why, young people need to be involved.
It falls on every succeeding group of people to push this system farther. I mean, this is not the country that it started with no rights for women and no white rights for minorities, and it's made steps in that direction, but everything has been a struggle, whether it's this minimum wage or earlier minimum wages or 40-hour weeks, ending child labor. Every one of those things was a struggle. Nothing was given. And so your generation has to realize that you're not exempt from the struggle. And I went to my first demonstration when I was 12 years old. I was at King's March on Washington. I was in the anti-war demonstration in 1961 as a 12-year-old kid. You have to engage and you have to make your voices heard. And you can't expect, power doesn't surrender power without a struggle. You can't ask people to say, we're going to make less money and we're going to accept lower rates of profit, because no one's saying you can't have a profit. You can't ask them to do that and expect them to say, oh, sure, you got a perfectly reasonable argument, we're going to do this. This is a result of struggle. So you don't have it because each of us have tried to move things forward. We've gotten as far as we've gotten, and we've got farther to go. I'm here because I still believe that we ought to be driving toward a different kind of future and a more inclusive and a better future. You obviously believe that. Resign yourself to the fact you're going to have to fight for
Time.
it.
And of course, you all are here, and you all know this, but I would say, stay mad. You should be mad. I'm mad too. And what Mark was talking about, it's because we're working against forces that since the founding of the United States of America has been a patriarchal, white supremacist, wealthy people at the top. Like, that's where we're coming back from, and like a lot of that is still here. It's baked into our systems, it's baked into the power structure, and so we're trying to claw it back all the time. It's not enough. We are moving too slowly. Like, the world is burning around us in a lot of different ways. So this is why we need bold proposals. We always need to be demanding more. You're absolutely right. There's no good excuse for it. But know that you have people up here who are also really, really mad. And we are going to fight with you and for you, and hopefully soon you and your generation will be in power, and we will be in a much better place.
Zoe did mention we have a couple more questions. Oh, perfect. Please share your perspective.
Hello? There we go. Hi, my name is Michelle Whitaker. I'm the Chief of Staff for Councilmember Juando, who wasn't able to be here, but he is proud to co-sponsor the HOME Act with Councilmember Mink, and to be working with County Executive to really move this forward. I want to just say, it's really great to hear what you all are sharing, and we do need your voices, not only on Tuesday, but on the 28th when we have our public hearings, and continuing to message all of the council members so that they know what stories are going on in our communities. I'm a renter myself, and I know that even though I have a very nice county job, that's a new thing for me, and with my previous jobs, housing was a struggle. And both of my husband and I have had to work the entire time. We have a young daughter. There's always been times where if we weren't making enough, we were worrying about how we were going to continue to live in the county. We need to be very mindful of what is in the bills. In particular, some of the bills exempt single-family homes. I used to rent a single-family home in Montgomery County. If that happened, the landlord would have been able to raise the rent and push my family out. Again, we need to know what are in these bills. I want you to speak to what those issues are. And speaking to what we need to go beyond, We do need to do issues around making sure we have sprinklers and good fire safety in our apartment buildings. We need to look at the troubled properties list and make sure that we're doing more to not only do the inspections, getting funding for the more inspectors, but really making sure that we are monitoring those on a continual basis to make sure that renters are getting the support they need. And speaking to the needs of those who are displaced, we need to really look at our system within HHS and the entire county government about what resources we do have, what we need, and how do we better resource and support displaced residents and residents as we're looking for permanent housing. We have a 7,000 person wait list, I believe, for housing, for our affordable housing within the county. We have thousands of people who are requesting that, and we get lots of calls in our office who are trying to find that housing, and we have limited ability to help them in some cases. So this bill, along with additional measures, can help us expand and make sure that we're not just doing that 10 or 15% that really just gets on the margins. This does not help a lot of our students. We need to do, or our residents, we need to do more for more of our residents, and I hope that you'll be with us, and Councilmember Joando really appreciates all that you're doing, and we look forward to hearing your stories. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Speaking of hearing more stories, looks like we have a couple more hands, right? Okay.
Oh, okay, thank you for being here, I appreciate it. So my name is Sophie, I'm a sophomore at Rockwell High School, and I just want to tell like a short story. I'll try to keep it short. But when I was younger, I used to live in a townhouse in Gaithersburg with my parents, and basically it was a time when it was like really difficult to pay those expenses between like paying for school lunches or even just like paying for the housing prices that were high at that time. And I remember like it was a distinct memory when it was like my parents were arguing in the other room about how we would pay for these prices, and my sister and I were just trying to distract ourselves from like listening to those arguments, because it really is incredibly taxing and like harmful to like the emotional well-being of our children when you hear those things, because our children should not and really do not want to hear those arguments and those things happen, because it was just really difficult to hear that you might not be able to live in a house anymore if you can't pay it. So I just wanted to share that story and really urge you to support rent stabilization so that we can ensure the safety and health and support for all families in Montgomery County. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that story, and I'm so sorry, and I hope that we're able to get this bill passed to address that. And I will just reiterate again, we need our other council members to hear these stories. So councilmember.mink@montgomerycountymd.gov. Please send if you're able to send us an email with your story, with your name, who you are, that kind of stuff, so that we can make sure that this makes it to all of the other council members. That's much appreciated. If you can get it to us by Sunday evening, that is super, super helpful. We really want to make sure that your stories get told on large platforms. And of course, we'll continue to engage. I'm sure we'll be working on email campaigns together to blast stuff out to everybody. We'll be doing phone banking, we'll be doing rallies, we'll be doing protests, we'll be doing meetings with council members, all sorts of different things, and looking for opportunities to make sure that those important stories get told. Thanks.
Since Councilmember mentioned stories, I do just want to mention really quickly as well, we've got Tino in the back. We will have some time after this panel is done, which will be in just a few minutes. But Tino is there to help you record testimony for this exact thing. So if you go back there, we'll have roughly 30 minutes right at the end until 3, where if you do want to record your testimony right here, right now, before you leave, talk about how housing has messed up your life. I know I could talk about that. Then go ahead, go back to Tino, and we will have time for that. Don't want to interrupt the panel, though. I think we had like 1 or 2 more hands. 2 more? Okay. Zoe says 2 more. We're doing what Zoe says.
Hello, my name is Michelle, and I'm a renter right here in Montgomery County. I was very, very lucky that when my lease came up to re-sign, I was still under the protection of the COVID temporary rent stabilization bill. However, my landlord was still able to raise the cost of my parking by about $40 per month per parking spot. So, as we can see, landlords can get around even temporary rent stabilization, and so I'm very, very in favor of this bill, and I really want to thank you so much for all the work you've put into it. My question is a little different, I think, than some of the people here, but I would like to hear your strategy. If you have a strategy or ideas of how you're going to get this bill passed, because it really is an uphill fight between the two competing bills that are going to be introduced.
Yeah, it sure is. When we came onto the council, for the last year or so, we thought that we were going to have a majority who were in favor of this, and some folks are not exactly where we thought that they were, as we have recently discovered. So what we have, however, on our side is the public, the community, you all. That is what this bill has, and the other bill does not have. I have not talked to one group or organization except for a letter I got from a real estate lobbying group that supports the other bill. And they actually said that the other bill, they were concerned that it sets it at 8% plus CPI, which is going to come out to around 15%, but they would rather that the bill just says 15%. So, yeah. So this is public pressure. Shame is a powerful motivating factor. Stories are going to work with some folks who legitimately don't understand that numbers that are falling around 4, 5, 8%, that those are driving people out of people's homes. I would suggest that you don't go from 0 to 100. We have time to mount a campaign that makes sense here. So you don't want to escalate and put all your cards on the table immediately. You start off with, and I come from an organizing background, so I'm putting on my organizing hat now. But you start off with emails telling your stories, with meetings, telling your stories with the ask attached to those meetings. Then you start making the request. You need to work in coalition, obviously, with other groups, which of course I know Sunrise does, to make sure that everyone is clear on what our asks are. We don't want to give too much and say we'd settle for this higher number or this amendment, ahead of each other. We need to make sure that we're all aligned, and we on the inside want to make sure that we know where you all are also when we're working in tandem. But it's a gradual acceleration of pressure over time. And the public hearing moment, as Michelle Whitaker mentioned, the Chief of Staff for Will Jawando, that's going to be a big, big day. There will be an afternoon and an evening hearing that day. It will be on in person as well as virtual, and we need everybody signed up for that. We need the room packed. This is literally the most important part of this whole thing. Thank you. I'm so sorry. And so we just want to make sure that we're in close conversation with you all. You don't want to go in and piss off the other council members, frankly, immediately, even though I know we're all pissed. But we have time to show an escalation that makes sense. So whoever can come on Tuesday, 9:30 and noon, that's going to be a big pressure point, an opportunity to make sure that the media is very, very clear about what we have in these two bills. We have the entire public and community here and so on, and then we're going to move on from there.
Yes, so you should do what Councilmember Kristen Mink just said. Also understand she's holding me hostage here, because if I turn on my mic, it'll deafen all of you. So I can't normally cut off time like how Mark Elrich knows that I usually like to. So you guys are very lucky today.
Can I have that mic?
Definitely not.
So a couple of things. One is we have to arm you with facts. Emotional arguments are great, but the facts are they don't need this. This is not necessary to protect their profitability, and I think that's what we've got to make clear to people, because they're going to claim that you're going to make this unprofitable for them, which is not true. This law has all the safeguards that they could possibly want, and so they're the ones that are being unreasonable. They're going to claim that no one's going to build new affordable housing here. They don't fall under the rent stabilization for 10 years, and if you know anything about what's being built here, it's almost all luxury, except for regulated housing, which is regulated for 99 years. So the part that we're going to produce that's made the most valuable in this moment is the 99-year protection. The other stuff, it's market rate. It may not even be in anybody's calculus by the time it gets 10 years from now, and wherever inflation takes it by then. So we've got to arm you with the facts. We've got to show you what it's going to do, and we have to take their arguments, which are so bogus that it's unbelievable, that you can rebut them so that you can go to your parents. And that's the other thing I'll say quickly. You have 160,000 compatriots in your schools. Your 160,000 students, if they understand this is the world they're graduating into in a year or two, they need to step up now. And you need to make it so the council can't get away with 1 day of hearings. They should have to have hearings until everybody's heard. And that's what legislators are elected to do, listen to the people. So create enough of a background that they have to have lots of hearings and fill those rooms up and talk to your parents. Because your parents, regardless of what we all think, your parents carry a lot of weight in this county. And your parents speaking up and saying, we didn't elect you to do this, is important. So they've got to understand your interest, and in many cases their own interest, to this legislation, and they've got to come forward and speak. The only reason that working class people have never had greater voice here is because they don't vote. If you think about the number of people who don't vote and what they look like, there's no reason we would be in this situation if we didn't have more of those votes. You've got to raise the consciousness that elections matter and there are consequences. The guys who signed that letter are part of a group of people who gave my opponent $10 million to run against me. $10 million.
That's a real estate group who signed a letter that was almost
in
favor of the other thing.
This is the real world of politics. I'm still standing, and I'm standing to be able to keep doing this, and I am going to keep doing this.
Also, as someone who sorts through a lot of our office's email inbox, all the stories that we get, it really does make a difference. So just keep reaching out. Councilmember.sales@MontgomeryCountyMD. That's ours. Happy to stay after and hand folks business cards and connect, so you can send us information. But again, it really does make a difference. And echoing what they both said, a lot of these things are just very systemic issues. There's, a lot of money that does go on behind it. So I would say the more data that does go into these decisions and the more data that supports these causes will help, strengthen something that does get passed.
And I'm getting a small note.
Growing the ranks of these groups like Sunrise, like DSA, and so on, that's really helpful too, because the larger your mailing list is, the more people you can send out those calls to action to. So continue to bring your friends into those groups. That's very helpful, because starting after Tuesday, there should be the email campaign is easy. You should start, blasting out to your list to please email the full council, explaining that why you support the Home Act and blah blah blah, your stories and how it's reasonable and all of that good stuff. So a huge recruitment that's what organizing is about. Bring people into the fold, make them feel like part of it, keep them informed, and have regular calls to action.
All right. All this has been awesome so far. These people up here are basically telling you how to, defeat people on council or get them to come to our side who are not yet supporting this very important measure that we all need. So that's awesome. Do everything that they said. I just said do. Make sure that you go back to where Tino is back there as well if you just want to record it on the spot. We will have time for that. We have one more question from the audience, and Zoe will bring the mic to that person. So kind.
Hi, thank you for letting me be the last questioner here. And I came late in the session, so I'm sorry if I'm asking questions that we have already been covered, but I just want to share my own experience. I'm a teacher in Montgomery County, and I teach at a private school, but honestly, I can't afford to live in Montgomery County. So this summer, I am looking for housing, and that's probably going to take me outside of Montgomery County. So people should realize that it is not just the working people who obviously deserve and need affordable housing, but it's also professionals that are teaching the students of Montgomery County. And it's just really a shame that, someone like myself who gives so much of my time and energy to raise children, to teach children who are going to be helping improve our society as a whole, that we really can't even live here in this community. So I'd like to know what more I can do as a teacher to bring awareness of this issue as a professional here, and hope that we can make change. I am calling around for moderately priced dwelling units, and none are available. So it is not something that I can make happen for myself, and I am a single mom as well, so there's a lot that I deal with. But people need to know that educators really struggle in Montgomery County.
Thank you for being a teacher. I'll say first, as a former teacher myself, that is a choice, and I miss it dearly, but it's a lot, and thank you. Yeah, it's really hard to make enough money in Montgomery County to be able to live in Montgomery County, especially if you're a single parent, a single income household. It's very, very difficult. And so this goes back to, as I mentioned before, that I had a colleague who said, oh, there's advocates are able to collect a couple stories, but this is not a widespread systemic problem. It's stories like that can really paint the picture that, in fact, it is impacting lots of different people working in lots of different situations. So your story is important. So I would ask, if you're able to join Tino at the table to make sure that your story gets recorded and that we have it in hand for Tuesday, that is really, really helpful. And to stay engaged in this fight, if they're, sign up for the mailing lists that are here, Sunrise, DSA, whatever sign up for all the mailing lists, make sure that you're staying in touch and that you're gonna get all the calls to action that they're gonna be putting out along the way. Sign up to testify, was it the 28th? For the 28th, and keep in mind that you got to sign up in advance. It's a few days, a couple days in advance. But I'm sure you're going to be on the mailing lists, so you'll have that information. Yeah, it's very, very unfortunate that we have a bunch of council members who are in favor of a bill that I think is not going to help many of our teachers, many of our families, many of our students to stay housed, but hopefully working together with the force of people power. We've done a lot with that before. That's really how we've gotten, historically, that's how we've gotten pretty much everything in this country. So hopefully we can get this too.
The only thing I'd add to what Kristen said is I'd substitute the word any for many. This bill, the other bill, doesn't help anybody who needs help. And the only people who benefit are people who don't have the social consciousness to realize that everybody has some responsibility to gauge their own desires against the impacts on what those desires have on society. I think, I compare it to like when we put money in a bank, we don't dictate the interest rate. Many people dealt with 1% or lower interest rates. We didn't get to walk in there and say, we're going to give you our money, this is the interest rate. We just took it. And to have this one industry which just decides how much they're going to take, and there's nothing in the way they behave that says, we understand the pain we're causing, so we're not going to take so much. We want license to take as much as we can take. That's just fundamentally wrong. And this is why we fight.
I would just say, stay organized. There's a lot of great, as Councilmember Mink and you saying earlier, there's so many organizations already represented here, and there's really a lot of great organizations who are doing this work on the ground. I know Everyday Canvassing and Tino, they're helping out with tenant associations, Renters Alliance do a lot with this, and so just the more people kind of work together and get organized to really build momentum for this and build people power, it increases the chances of getting necessary bills passed for renters and tenant rights.
So I guess we have one bonus question. People keep asking me to ask this, so I have to ask y'all. So, I don't know. This will be our last question, though, and then Zoe will close us out. And of course, if you want to record testimony with Tino, as well as do any of the other next steps, right, that we've talked about, we will rehash those things so you have the whole thing. But so the last question that folks have been asking me to ask is that, as explained in this June 2022 Maryland Matters article, this group called Progressives for Progress is really just a bunch of developers And this group has endorsed many council candidates, including Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez, who introduced the bill that we're talking about, or the 8% plus CPI bill that we're talking about. Not the Home Act, we like the Home Act. The bad bill, exactly. And also including Andrew Friedson and others. And so we believe that this is why those council members aren't supporting the 3% Home Act. So how will you stand up to this super PAC, and how will you interact with the elected officials who've received support from it, is what folks have been asking me to ask you. So close this out.
I mean, how will we defeat them? I didn't need Progressives for Progress to get elected. Neither did Mark. We have people power. We are going to defeat them with this bill the exact same way we defeated them at the election box, which is the power of community organizing, the power of stories, the power of public pressure. That's how we're going to win. We won at the ballot box. We're going to win. We're going to win this fight. At some point, we're going to win this fight because failure is not an option here. It's just the timeline that we're sorting through right now. But we're going to win as long as we stay engaged in the fight. That's all I'm going to say on that.
I interact with these folks from time to time. I'm just bluntly honest. I would tell them, in fact, if they're listening to the Instagram, hi out there, and I would tell them the same thing if I was sitting across from them as I'm saying in this room. It really troubles me the way they look at the world. Everybody's free to think what they think, but if your thoughts don't include the well-being of the people that you affect, I'm going to have a hard time agreeing with you. So I just deal with it. And, I was lucky enough to get enough grassroots support. Thank you, Sunrise. People went out on the streets and campaigned that you can overcome that kind of money. And people can overcome that kind of money. It's been done before. When I was a county council member, I won my first election at an at-large race with $65,000. The other three winners spent between $300,000 and $400,000. So money is not the solution to everything. It's an obstacle, but it's not everything. And arguments mean a lot. If people understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, and understand the justice of your cause, don't underestimate the average person's ability to see right from wrong, and to understand when someone's trying to take advantage of you rather than when somebody's trying to help you. And I think the cases here are pretty straightforward. That's why their first press release is, first place, a bunch of lies. And then they immediately introduce legislation at the end of my budget process, oh, by the way, saying I should spend $40 million on rent subsidies. Thank you very much to have the government.
It's not even legislation.
Yeah.
It's not even like they're calling it part of a package. Well, it really just should have been an email. It was like, we'd like to see money put in. I'd like to see that money too, but where is that money coming? There's no suggestion or anything.
So their solution to the hardship is that the government gives rent subsidies so they can pay the higher rents that they want to charge. It's like, how about you guys collect from yourselves and collect the money from your amazingly wealthy properties and then provide it as rent subsidies to people who need it. That would be a just solution. There are just other ways to solve the problem. I'll inform them of what I'll ask them to make this contribution themselves rather than asking the government to make it. I will be meeting with them, I think, in the next week or so. I'm not afraid to sit down and talk with people.
I'll just say that, being the county executive is different than being the council member, and there's are many benefits to that. I will work with, depends. Depends on which way the wind is blowing. But, I'll work with anybody who shares the same goal and value on any particular issue on that issue. And where we disagree, then we will disagree. There are folks there who I've had, who I disagree vehemently on one issue on, but they will vote and support and work with me on another issue. And in that case, I want their vote on that issue. And so we maintain relationships, and we work together where we can work together, and that is in the community's benefit. The way that I interact with legislators as a fellow legislator is different than the way that I did when I was an organizer, than when I'm an activist and so on, and is different, if you're the county executive and so on. So, and it's the same thing for them. They're going to work with me when they agree with me and not when I don't. And we try to maintain an atmosphere in the building where we're all, able to do that.
So I just want to clarify, what I was referring to is what I do with developers. I mean, I agree with her that when you're trying to make things, you negotiate. But I don't have to negotiate with developers. They don't have, there's no vote they're going to take. The vote that's going to be taken is by 11 people on the council. And that's where we've got to work to get agreement on. Whether the developers are happy, partly happy, or miserable is not my issue. It's what the will of the council majority is what I'm trying to work toward.
Yeah. All I'll add is that Councilmember Sales was proudly not endorsed by Progressive for Progress. And I know she has spoken out against some on multiple occasions. And I do think County Executive Elwich's race is kind of a good example of how you do overcome that. I think we all got, I know personally got many mailers from the Blair campaign, many TV advertisements, but County Executive Elwich still did win and overcame the money. And it's just a testament to the organizing on the ground, the people having, the people rising above the big money.
All right, thank you so much to all of our panelists for coming out. Really appreciate your time. Really appreciate you answering all the questions that people had. I guess you're welcome to stay up here if you like, but Zoe is going to give us some closing remarks so that we can segue into cleanup, but also the next steps for what we are going to do, how we're going to keep this fight, and also if people want to record testimony with Tino, it's still going on in the back. With Tino, Tino, Sophie, and Hanan are all going to be doing that together. So, Zoe, if you want to come on up, really appreciate it.
Cool, yes. We want to thank all the council members, the speakers that were here. Thank you so much, guys, for being here. And to all the attendees, this was a super powerful town hall. We're really grateful that you guys came out and shared your voices. So yes, this has been alluded to a lot during the panel, but we are going to have a couple of events. So as you've heard, Tuesday, 9 a.m., that's what we were, 9:30. Get there early, just in case. Indoors, the bill will be introduced, and then outside, I think there's going to be a rally at noon. So.
Actually, you should say 9 a.m. because it's going to take people time to get
Okay, yeah, so come at 9 a.m. If you can go to one or both, or if you can't make it, we have some other options. Tomorrow, we will be canvassing the community in Wheaton at noon, yes. And basically, we just want people to know about these two bills, the 8% plus inflation one that Councilmember Natalie Fanny Gonzalez is introducing, and the HOME Act, the 3%. So we will just be talking to community members about this, and this is a great way to share these two bills with them and why we want the HOME Act passed. And then last but not least, please share your testimony with Tino, Hanan, and Sophie. You guys are amazing, and thank you so much for coming. And yeah, grab some pins if you want to as well.
And thank you so much to Sunrise Movement for hosting. And shout out to CASA, who's also in the house and has been a huge player in getting rent stabilization passed all over Maryland and beyond.
I want to give people the address we're launching from for tomorrow.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
All of these events will be shared by email also, and tell your friends if they left early, because some people left early. I will be doing that as well.
And if anyone's thinking of coming out to the canvas tomorrow, the address we're launching from will be 3503 Pear Tree Court. That again, 3503 Pear Tree Court. Thank you.
I should know this. I am 18 years old. Okay, no. It might ask you to save.